Tonight, the life and legacy of Brian Mulroney. Canada's former Prime Minister dies at the age of 84. His profound contributions to the country.
He was an extraordinary statesman, and he will be deeply, deeply missed.
The political and personal tributes. A new ruling on Quebec's secularism law, setting the stage for a Supreme Court showdown.
It's impacting people's right to equality.
Also, the political fallout over how a public servant was granted the ArriveCan contract.
This individual should be immediately fired.
Plus, dozens killed waiting for aid in Gaza, while Canada has yet to allow a single special entry visa.
The largest hostage taking right now in the world.
And all in an extra day's work.
Workers are not being paid their regular wages.
The leap year debate over wage theft.
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina.
Good evening, everyone. He led this country for nearly a decade and continued serving it long after that. Tonight, condolences are pouring in for Brian Mulroney, Canada's 18th Prime Minister. Late this evening, here's how Canada's 23rd remembered him.
He was an extraordinary statesman, and he will be deeply, deeply missed.
A sentiment echoed by the leader of the opposition.
A husband, a father, a brilliant businessman, a prime minister, a statesman.
Mulroney's daughter, Caroline, an Ontario cabinet minister, shared the news on social media and said her father died peacefully, surrounded by family. Ontario Premier Doug Ford remembered him as a mentor.
You want to talk about leadership. You want to talk about trailblazers, visionaries. That was Brian Mulroney.
And former Prime Minister Jean Chrétien said that even though he had his political differences with Mulroney, they shared a lot in common.
I was an opponent of him all my political career. But in politics, opposition is opposition. It's like playing hockey. You can fight on the ice, but have a beer together after that. And we had a lot of things in common.
Our coverage begins tonight with CTV's Annie Bergeron-Oliver on Mulroney's life and his legacy. Annie.
Omar, over his impressive yet at times divisive political career, Mulroney left an unmistakable mark on the country.
Si nous votons non, on déchire ces gains historiques.
His passion was politics and the pursuit of power. As a student, he became an advisor to Conservative Prime Minister John Diefenbaker. He worked behind the scenes in Conservative politics for years, finally running for national leadership of the Conservative Party in 1976, losing painfully to an unknown Joe Clark. Smarting from his defeat, Mulroney joined corporate Canada as a senior executive, but continued an underground campaign to oust Clark. His efforts culminated in 1983 when he won the leadership of the Conservative Party.
Together, we're going to build a brand new party and a brand new country.
He went on to form the largest majority in Canadian history, having pilloried Prime Minister John Turner during the 1984 election debate.
I had no option.
Well,
Truman, your next question,
you
please.
had an option, sir. You could have said, I am not going to do it. This is wrong for Canada.
Mulroney embarked on a stormy activism prime ministership that in 9 years exhausted and polarized the country. He took Canada on a forced march through two major efforts to bring Quebec into the constitutional fold. Both tries, Meech Lake and the Charlottetown Accord, failed miserably. On the international stage, however, Mulroney gave Canada a respect and a presence it has not always had. Mulroney played a key role in convincing President George H.W. Bush Sr. to create an international coalition to oust Saddam Hussein's forces from Kuwait, including a combat role for Canadian forces.
Free trade sucks! Free trade sucks!
The worst fears of Mulroney's enemies and the greatest plaudits from his friends culminated in his controversial decision to forge a free trade agreement between Canada and the United States. The campaign that followed divided the country into opposing camps, but Mulroney carried the day, winning a second historic majority in 1988. Not content with that achievement, Mulroney pushed the country hard on a number of fronts, negotiating a historic acid rain treaty with the U.S., reforming the tax system and introducing the reviled goods and services tax, The country drifted into recession, its spirits exhausted by endless political warfare. Mulroney's popularity dropped to an all-time low. Sensing his time was up, Mulroney resigned.
The time has come for me to step aside.
And Mulroney handed over power to Kim Campbell. After leaving office, Mulroney was accused by the governing Liberal Party of accepting $5 million in kickbacks on the sale of Airbus jets to Air Canada from arms dealer Karl-Heinz Schreiber. In 1997, the RCMP cleared him of any involvement. Mulroney successfully sued the Liberal government for $2 million. A few years later, as Schreiber faced extradition to Germany for tax evasion, he revealed a bombshell that Mulroney accepted a $300,000 secret cash payment shortly after he left office. Prime Minister Stephen Harper was forced to call a public inquiry, a humiliation for Mulroney and his family.
I think I understand.
Commissioner Nicholas was 10 years old. He would Merci.
In his final summation, Justice Jeffrey Oliphant found the financial and business dealings between the two were unethical.
Many believe Mulroney had it within his grasp to become one of Canada's outstanding prime ministers. His achievements in office were significant, but his legacy, Omar, complicated.
All right, Eddie, thank you. Brian Mulroney will also be remembered for his campaign to rally Commonwealth nations against apartheid in South Africa and his support of Nelson Mandela.
So I said to our guys, to hell with it. We're going to go and lower the boom here. And we're going to be firmly on the side of Mandela in South Africa. And we are going to reject the arguments that Mandela is a communist. As I said to them, how would you know he's a communist? He's been in jail for 27 years. Has he spoken to you lately? The answer, of course, was no. Well, why do you say these things?
I had the chance to speak with the former prime minister a year and a half ago after the Queen died about her support of those efforts to end apartheid in South Africa.
I was there with her. I can guarantee you that without her thoughtful, wise, brilliant leadership, all private, all of it, without that, that was indispensable to the success that the Commonwealth enjoyed in our two principal objectives at that very difficult time, namely the liberation of Nelson Mandela and the destruction of the apartheid system.
For more on Mulroney's impact, let's bring in CTV's chief political correspondent, Vassy Kapelos. And Vassy, the Prime Minister talked tonight about what a political asset Mulroney was even later in his life during Canada's negotiations with Donald Trump on the new NAFTA.
Yeah, it's amazing, actually, the degree to which Brian Mulroney played a part in those negotiations all those decades after he led the initial negotiations with the White House for a free trade deal. He was, doing a multitude of things, including counseling both Chrystia Freeland and the Prime Minister personally on how they should navigate the negotiations. But also he had the ear of Donald Trump, one of the few Canadians who can actually say that was the case. And so he almost personally lobbied Trump on behalf of Canada, as well as a host of other U.S. lawmakers. He pleaded the case for Canada throughout the whole process, and he offered advice nonstop to both the Prime Minister and, at the time, Foreign Affairs Minister Chrystia Freeland.
So many professional reflections tonight, but also deeply personal ones as well. How will you most remember Brian Mulroney?
I think, Omar, I too have some personal reflections, and they are primarily through rejections from Brian Mulroney to me. I would often ask him for interviews, particularly as I was coming up through my career. And instead of replying as he could or his assistant could have and just saying no, he would always call me himself to say why he couldn't do it and what he thought about the issue I was pitching him on. And then he would very quickly turn to asking about how my son was or my family was or my marriage was going. And he would always impart some wisdom about spending time with his own family and the importance of that in his life. And certainly tonight, I think like so many Canadians, I'm reflecting on those personal interactions and the classiness with which he conducted himself.
Family deeply important to him. All right, Vassy, thank you so much. Turning to other news now, in a major legal ruling in Mulroney's home province, Quebec's highest court has decided that a law banning public sector workers from wearing religious symbols on the job does not violate the charter. Bill 21 says Quebec is secular and that public sector workers in positions of authority, including teachers, judges, and police officers, can't wear hijabs, turbans, crosses, or kippas at work. Opponents argue it discriminates against people based on their faith. The decision could be potentially challenged at the Supreme Court. Former Defense Minister Anita Anand says she was surprised to learn that the CEO of a company that received millions of dollars for work on the ArriveCan app was also a Defense Department employee. It's the latest in a long line of scandals to hit the program. Here's CTV's Michael Couture.
Well, it turns out that the ArriveCan contract was awarded to a D&D employee.
Revelations first reported by CTV News dominated debate around the ArriveCan app. A firm run by an employee of the Department of National Defense was given a $7.9 million contract to work on the controversial app. The procurement minister at the time says it should have never happened.
There is certainly a rule that would prevent conflict of interest of that sort. And I was extremely surprised to hear that this individual was an employee of the Government of Canada.
Dalian is a hardware and software cybersecurity company that I founded 23 years ago.
David Yeo heads the company, which has received multiple government contracts from National Defense, the RCMP, and other departments. National Defense officials tell CTV News Yeo has been suspended, as have the contracts with Dalian.
All procurement has to be done through a thorough lens of accountability.
Earlier this week, the Liberals also announced a review of the government program to support Indigenous contractors. That's not enough for the leader of the opposition.
This individual should be immediately fired, and there should be an immediate police investigation of his conduct and that of the company with which he's associated.
Asked about controversy around the ArriveCan app, the Prime Minister pointed to ongoing investigations around the cost and the contracting process.
That's why there will be consequences for anyone who tried to profiteer or profit off of this extraordinarily difficult situation we went through a few years ago.
CTV News has reached out to Mr. Yeo and Dalian Enterprises for comment, but we have yet to hear back. Omar.
Michael Couture in Ottawa, where the Foundation for Universal Drug Coverage was laid today.
Today is a giant step forward for our health system. It was made possible by two adversaries asking what we have in common rather than what separates us.
After protracted talks with the NDP, the government tabled a bill that aims to fully cover the costs for diabetes medication and contraceptives. The health minister estimates this could come at a price tag of around $1.5 billion. No timeline on the rollout, but the success of the plan hinges heavily on provinces coming on board. The death toll in Gaza surpassed 30,000 today since the October 7th attack that killed 1,200 Israelis. Canada's immigration minister admitted today attempts to get trapped Canadians out are failing. CTV's Judy Trin on the desperation.
Images of crowds around aid trucks. The Israeli military says it fired warning shots before shooting at people it considered threats. More than 100 Palestinians were killed, hundreds wounded, some run over by trucks. Canada is considering doing airdrops of humanitarian aid, but after meeting with the Israeli ambassador, the immigration minister says there are no assurances of Israeli help to get remaining Canadians to safety.
We are all failing Gazans at this point, and I think that is something that is probably the largest hostage-taking right now in the world.
There are at least 1,200 people with Canadian connections trapped in Gaza, among them approximately 200 citizens and permanent residents, along with 986 extended relatives who applied for emergency visas. For 3 days, Palestinian Canadians held a silent vigil on Parliament Hill to draw attention to loved ones who can't escape the war.
This is my newborn cousin and my grandpa, and this is my family there.
Since the emergency visa program was announced in January, the federal government has not approved a single visa. It's resulting in desperate action.
We've seen even many people sending money to their family from even our community to smuggle people out and bribe the government, the Egyptian government mainly. It costs between $5,000 to $10,000 per person.
The Rafah crossing is controlled by Egypt on one side and Hamas on the other, while Israel monitors all who exit Gaza. Canadian officials say 12 people in the process of applying for emergency visas crossed on their own.
Or people have actually been able to get through the border, I suspect at great financial cost.
Despite calls to lift the cap on emergency visas, Mark Miller says he doesn't want to promote false hope when Israel is allowing few foreign nationals to leave the war zone. Omar.
All right, Judy, thanks. And as of tonight, Mexicans entering Canada need a visa. Ottawa says the new rule should help curb a surge in asylum claims.
We have seen exponential growth in asylum claims, particularly from Mexican nationals in the last year.
Mexico has responded saying it, quote, regrets this decision and believes that there were other options available before putting this measure in place, adding that it reserves the right to act in reciprocity. Coming up, turning the page on literary classics.
Is the context then the same as the context now?
The debate over pulling certain books from the curriculum. Plus, the extra workday that may not pay off. Some of the most well-known book titles of all time will soon be removed from the curriculum in BC's largest school district over concerns about racist language. And that's drawing mixed reaction and generating a lot of debate. CTV's Andrew Johnson reports.
It's a challenging film examining racism when a black man is falsely accused.
The defendant is not guilty, but somebody in this courtroom is.
Just like the book it's based on, and now To Kill a Mockingbird won't be taught in BC's largest school district.
It seems like a crazy decision, right? This is a beautiful book. It's a profoundly anti-racist book.
BC's premier isn't alone scratching his head over a staple of Canadian classrooms being kicked out of the curriculum. The Surrey School District in Metro Vancouver is making the move after a year-long review by teachers identified several issues.
The portrayal of black characters as one-dimensional, the use of the white savior trope, the use of ableist language, the use of the N-word.
They concluded the classic Harper Lee novel, as well as In the Heat of the Night and Of Mice and Men, don't hold up as teaching tools in 2024.
There's other literature that has come since that deals with these issues in a way that'll resonate with our students and maybe better captures the current social landscape of the world today.
That raises a question one Canadian expert on race says should be asked more often.
What makes the book classic? Who decided it was classic? At what point was it made classic? And what was the context then that contributed to it being labeled classic? What new have we learned over the years?
To Kill a Mockingbird has been challenged in several Canadian communities. Here in BC, the Surrey District says it is still in school libraries, where someone can take Premier Eby's advice today and give it a read to decide for yourself. Andrew Johnson, CTV News, Vancouver.
Still ahead.
A lifetime of memories being destroyed. It's emotional.
A major storm turns maritime roads into rivers. In Texas today, an out-of-control wildfire is now the largest in the state's history.
There was a house there. There was a house there.
Hot, dry, and windy weather are fanning the flames. The Smokehouse Creek fire has left a grandmother dead, forced thousands to flee, and torched homes and ranches, killing cattle. From one extreme to another, and a blizzard that has triggered a dangerous series of collisions in Alberta. Images posted online show several cars and a truck in the ditch on the side of the Trans-Canada Highway near Banff. The crash and snowstorm shut down all westbound lanes, bringing traffic to a standstill. And on the East Coast, a major storm and flooding that devastated parts of New Brunswick.
When I woke up at 10 after 1, it was almost coming in my front door, and at 3 o'clock, it was coming in my front door and going down the basement stairs.
The town of Sussex, with about 6,000 people, was underwater after a day of heavy rainfall forced people out of their homes. Fierce winds also knocked out power to tens of thousands. After the break, an extra day, but no extra pay.
You're working an extra day for free, essentially.
The leap year letdown. The extra day in February happens once every 4 years, but some salaried employees, doing the math, are experiencing a leap year letdown today. CTV's Adrian Gobriel explains why workers are feeling shortchanged.
As if having an extra day of February wasn't bad enough.
You're working an extra day for free, essentially.
Every 4 years, our calendar gains a day to sync up with the Earth's rotation around the sun. Though like some cruel joke concocted by the cosmos, Canadian employees who are paid an annual salary are likely getting stiffed today.
In essence, there's nothing that can be done.
That's because those who earn a salary are paid for 365 days a year, not 366. On the flip side, those paid by the hour are emerging as the winners on February 29th. Some HR professionals are floating the idea that this is actually a good thing for the economy.
For all businesses, you've got this extra day that you can be selling your services, delivering your services, selling your products, which is a wonderful thing given this current climate. So I think with, unemployment potentially in the rise in a lot of different markets, this is a positive thing to help bolster the economy this year.
37% of all employees in Canada are salaried. Assuming they work an 8-hour day, Canadian corporations could be saving more than $2 billion, while individual workers could lose more than $300. Some employment lawyers believe that workers are getting the short end of the stick.
You see today as an example of a much larger problem across the country.
Yeah, what we're seeing is basically an epidemic of wage theft. What that looks like is that workers are not being paid their regular wages, not getting overtime pay, not getting public holiday and vacation pay. That's what we're seeing.
Currently, there's no legislation forcing employers to pay up during a leap year, unless it's written into an individual contract or if your boss is feeling generous. For those looking at the bright side of the moon, the good news is this will only be an issue every 4 years. Adrian Gobriel, CTV News, Toronto.
And that's a snapshot of this Thursday. We are giving the last word tonight to Brian Mulroney himself and some personal reflections he shared with our very own Lloyd Robertson. For all of us at CTV National News, thank you for watching and good night.
What do you think your father would have thought if he'd been around long enough to see your success, elected as Prime Minister?
I think my father would first have been flabbergasted. So surprised would he have been by this. But then I think he would have been secretly proud, and he was very quiet in terms of expressing that kind of enthusiasm for anything. And I listened to the radio coming in of the reports of our victory, and I was, of course, pretty hyper, and I couldn't sleep at all. And at 3 minutes to 7, I heard the mill whistle, which was the whistle that controlled his life. And from the window, I could see my dad's little house. And I was just overcome with emotion because of what he might have thought and how hard he had worked to see some success, but never quite saw it.